there was a rumor that they sourced their dinners from the tiers that
Oh my god.
they had.
Oxford is creepy.
But
Interesting.
UCL is also creepy in its own way because there is the actual body of Jeremy Bentham, but his skeleton is preserved in one of the UCL buildings. Like his real skeleton, his real bones.
Hi everyone, welcome to an episode of Spill the Tea, now with Aditi. So today we have a very special guest, Miss Sophie Hwang. And Sophie has done her undergrad from UCL in Comparative Literature, and then she's gone on to do her master's from Oxford. And today she's going to spill the tea with us about these amazing, prestigious, elite colleges in the UK. Welcome, Sophie.
Hi, happy to be here. It's very apt that it's called Spill the Tea, given the British reference. They do drink a lot of tea, that's not a myth.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your high school background, like where you went to high school and what your high school profile was like? How did you build, your knowledge in literature? How did you get there?
I kind of hopped around a bit because I was in Singapore. I went to local school until middle school, and during freshman year, I transferred into an American international school, so it was a whole different switch in the system. But you know how US schools are, you have to be an all-rounder.
Yeah.
It was a big change. Like, I'm not a sports person. I did like I could do 8 pull-up. They wrote 0.5 in my fitness gram because I could go half up and I dropped, and it was really embarrassing.
Oh my god.
And I'm saying that in front of the camera, but it's okay.
Okay, so Sophie, why don't you tell us a little bit about you? We'd love to know what inspired you to go into comparative literature. How did you end up at UCL? Just give us the background.
Well, I actually went to an American school, so I had the intention of going to American college, but then at the last minute, I just had a thought, since I'm going to be studying literature, why not the UK? It's given birth to so many great English writers, but I actually applied for English Lit. I didn't actually know what comparative literature was at the beginning. And so when I applied to UCL with English Lit, they rejected me. They were like, no.
Wow.
But if you apply through comparative literature, we'll reconsider your application.
Interesting.
But it made sense retrospectively because my application was all about reading literature in different languages and comparing their translations. And so it made sense. It was more natural for me to stumble upon comparative literature.
That makes so much sense, actually. Amazing that the university guided you in the right direction. Okay, so just for our viewers, do you want to tell us a little bit about what comparative literature is?
So comparative literature is a study of 2 or more literatures from different countries, just studying their interaction beyond their geographical and linguistical borders. I actually had, on my first day of classes, I had a professor tell me, when someone asks you about what comparative literature is, you can't, it's the study of 2 different languages at the same time. But it kind of is. You just kind of study their interaction in a really close way, both in terms of like languages or how their culture impacted their reception, that sort of stuff. But it's also about comparative theory, like how when you compare something, like what comes into play, like what you have to think about. For example, that transition from text to film, which I actually, that's how I figured out what I wanted to study more, because I love the idea of what happens to a text when they become something that's not in the original form. Comparative literature consists all of that. Just fill like interactions between the arts, the artistic mediums, film, literature, sometimes music, but mainly literature of 2 different languages.
And do you think UCL was a good place for you to study something so interesting, so intricate, and so diverse?
It was. I think I've mentioned it, but when I joined, it was a fairly new course. They're really attendant on what goes into education.
So why UCL? Anything specific? Was it your dream school? Like, what about UCL pulled you in to choose it for your undergrad experience?
I think just it being in London, the campus is beside Euston Square Station, which is literally 15 minutes from King's Cross, 15 minutes from Covent Garden. It's in the heart of London.
It's the it place to be.
Yeah, it is the it place.
That's amazing. How do you define the curriculum? Like, how's the curriculum in terms of rigor? How's the curriculum in terms of just being interesting? What's the real setup like? Is it very, very rigorous to be an undergrad student in the UK?
It was definitely a change because where in high school you get a broad coverage of different subject matters. In the UK, you just focus on that one specific thing that you chose for, but much in depth. It can be rigorous depending on your course, but it can also be fun. I've had courses like, studying French film or looking at East Asian literature, Ghibli films to like modern Korean literature or Japanese literature from like 2,000 years back.
Wow.
It was a whole lot of fun. How that course was structured was that how the exam was structured was that you get questions like, who's this guy and what's his story? And you have to write everything you know about him. And Greek mythology and the gods, like you have so many children, so many stories, and you just have to memorize a 700-page textbook that I've taken over a month to go over. So it can be intense, but it's also
a nerd's dream.
Yeah.
Like if you love the subject you're doing, that sounds like you would actually have fun doing it. But then it sounds like you actually have to be interested to enjoy it.
Of course, like I didn't pull out I did a little, but that process was fun.
Got it. No, it sounds like that someone who's really into the subject and knows for sure what they want to do should definitely go to the UK, because
of course
they would have a lot of fun just going in depth into whatever they're studying while still having the ability to move around within the area and experimenting.
Yes, of course.
Amazing. So, undergrad in UCL as an international student, what's that like? What's the experience like?
It's amazing. It's amazing to be international in London. It's so much fun. It has such a diverse community. There's so many international students at UCL too. There's a huge international community. There's a couple of different societies that cater for different international groups. There are international food events that, that you can go to and get some international cuisine. There's a great selection of international food in London, like a lot of different
upsides of colonization, you learned how to cook from the other people.
Exactly.
It's a very strong stereotype that the UK is very nerdy. Like the US is perhaps more liberal artsy, it's probably more flexible. Students there probably have a wider range. Like you said, an American school will prepare you for so much, whereas the UK, not very unlike the Indian system, is probably more academically oriented. At times, our students are concerned that if they go to the UK, they won't have as much fun, or the undergrad experience won't be as vibrant. Their concern is that it's going to be very studious, very nerdy. Is that really it?
I think they're saying that because, US applications, you have to be an all-rounder. Like, you have to do sports, you have to do community service, whereas I think UK is more focused on that major that you're applying for. That's where it comes from. But I've had a lot of fun at UCL. I think there's a huge culture. There's a lot to do around the area in London itself. Like, there are student bars. Like, there's a bar called Phineas where we have like jazz nights, like drag queen nights. It's a whole lot of fun. We have a bar called Mully's where they do karaoke nights every Saturday. It's amazing. It's so much fun. I will say that though, like, I feel like because there is a campus, there's a main campus, but the buildings are kind of separated in the area, so you don't really get that college campus experience like you do in American colleges. And so I think if you want to make friends, if you want to socialize, you have to be more proactive in making friends. So you have to join societies, you have to find your group of people, and you have to make an effort out of yourself.
Every college has its stereotypes. Is there a particular stereotype for UCL or its students?
There is a stereotype that, we hate people from King's College. And it's very much true. It is true. People just have that inherent rivalry against Kings. Like, this is especially so in sports. Like UCL or London universities in general have a big sports culture.
Okay.
Like, people get off early on Wednesdays so that they could go for their trainings, and then there is this huge everyone goes to this one club called Loop. They have their sports nights there. They just get drunk and party. But yeah, even if you're not in sports, but especially if you're in sports, you just have that little thing going against Kings. Like, I remember when I started my master's, I met someone who did his undergrad in King's. And at that point, we've graduated like 1 or 2 years ago. Like undergrad, like beat matters nothing. Like you don't really, it doesn't matter to you anymore. But I like found myself arguing about which university is better. It's kind of,
oh my god.
Yeah, it's a lifelong thing, I think.
Oh, amazing. I mean, it's such a thing, college rivalries. I was going to ask you about that next, but I think this one really covered it. But yeah, I'm guessing it's mutual from both sides. But was there any part of London that you struggled to adjust to? For example, the weather?
The weather is bad. It is as bad as people make it out to be.
Oh.
I didn't realize this in the first 2 years because I was always back in Singapore during the winter holidays. But in the year of COVID, I got to stay in London for a full year, and that's when I realized there is no sunlight till March. The seasonal depression element is so real because you're like, oh, I'm feeling gloomy, I'm feeling depressed, and there's like that first day with sunlight in like March, and you're like, actually, I'm just lacking vitamin D.
Oh my god,
yeah,
that bad.
It's true. But London, it can get lonely, as I said, because you have to be really active in seeking your own people out. And if you're not in a sports society, for example, if you're not in a particular, group or community, it can be a bit hard for you to make friends, have fun. And so I think that's why I appreciated the Oxford experience so much, because it was so different. I mean, because you have that college system. I was in Jesus College, but you get to stay on campus. You have all your meals there. You have all your life there, your social events in the college. You get so many formals where it's like a fancy dinner in one of the Oxford like dining halls. It was really nice. And you actually get to naturally meet people even without making that much of an effort, which is nice.
It sounds better.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, I was going to ask you about that, how UCL is different from the Oxford experience, because they are such different colleges, differently situated, geographically speaking, in the setting, the urban, like just not so urban setting, just generally having a true campus. Like, it must make a huge difference to the
It's very
student
different, I think. If you want a campus life, like Oxford is really great for that, but the city itself is very small. There's not much to do as compared to London. So I found myself going back to London every single month just to have things to do.
Yeah.
But there are still very much university-specific things to do. Like when the weather is nice, which is not that many months of the year, we would go punting, which is just boating in one of the rivers, which is really nice. The formals are a huge culture, like it's a big culture there. I think some of the colleges have more specific dinners. Like I know the Modeling College has a venison dinner, and there was a rumor that because they have a deer garden in their college, there was a rumor that they sourced their dinners from the deers that
my god
they had. I feel like I asked someone and they confirmed it, but
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Oxford is creepy. Interesting.
But UCL is also creepy in its own way because there is the actual body of Jeremy Bentham, who is considered like a spiritual founder of UCL because he was the one who advocated for education for all, but his skeleton is preserved in one of the UCL buildings. Like his real skeleton, his real bones.
Okay, I am really packed up on GK right now. Okay, one is raising dinner in-house and the other one is keeping the remains of its founders.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have its quirks.
They have their quirks. Speaking of opportunities, students want amazing opportunities once they graduate. Degree holder from UCL. What was your experience like once you graduated and were trying to get professional opportunities? Did it open the right doors for you?
The thing is, like, when I was about to graduate and look for jobs graduate from UCL, I already knew by then that I was going to do a postgrad degree. And so I was a little less worried about the job searching element. But I know that it can be very intense, like finding a job in an international country. You might not, like, you don't know if you're going to get a work visa, like that sort of thing. Like that logistical nightmare just comes into play as you're about to graduate. That is a lot of stress. So I think a lot of students, what they try to do is that they consistently try to look for internships throughout the semesters. Especially, I have a lot of friends in econ, but what they do, they spend their winter breaks looking for internships, and they have to secure an internship then, so that they would have something to do over summer, and that's how they secure a full-time job afterwards.
And were they successful in general?
A lot of them.
Got it. So the opportunities were available in general.
They are. It's just very competitive, and you have to put your work, you have to put in your effort, but it does exist.
Any particular activities that you did in high school that you think were, a reason that you succeeded in getting into UCL?
I feel like I haven't done much activity-wise, but I did do internships here and there, but not through school. But once I've reached out to personally, just being proactive is really important. Just demonstrating that, it's not enough to know that you are interested in that course, but you have to show it through actions and what you can write on paper. I think publishing my own book was a huge boost. I wrote a lot in my application, the kind of books that I like to read and the kinds of idea I like to explore. Just, I feel like for the UK, that demonstrating that intellectual curiosity is really important.
I'd love to talk a little bit about your master's experience as well. You did your master's at Oxford, which is obviously an absolute dream. But do you think your undergrad in the UK prepared you to apply for and actually do this amazing course?
I think knowing that it's not geographically that far away helped. I think comparative literature is a very niche course, as in compared to English Lit. The courses at UCL have a really broad coverage of different things, like from Greek mythology, and you get such a good foundation that you know what your area of interest is. It helps you to focus what your niche is. That's what you need for your master's. You have to go beyond knowing that I want to study comparative literature. You need to know what about comparative literature. And in the case of master's applications, you have to write a research proposal. Just knowing exactly what you want to study from Oxford, using Oxford resources, and how being at Oxford is going to help you.
Right, that makes a lot of sense actually. I mean, generally, if you want to do something as deep as comparative literature, I mean, it's such a niche course, like you said. You really want help figuring out the hows and what's and like exactly what part of it makes it your calling. If you had to talk about the single greatest thing about going to UCL, like if a student wants to go to UCL, what's the one reason they should absolutely choose UCL over another college for their undergrad?
That's difficult. I just like a lot of UCL specific, just the little things even in the environment itself. Like there is this beautiful Gothic structured bookstore right by the college, right by the university. It's called Waterstones. And it's so nice. Like there's lots of nice cafes around. Just being in London, like if you want that London life, I think UCL is the place to go. It's a good interplay of traditional and modern. Like you get that nice building, you get that sense of being in London, like how I imagined it watching London set movies from the early 2000s. But you also get that, rigor and in your studies and actually getting to study what you really love in a great environment.
At the same college, do you think the UCL students for masters had a different experience than, the undergrad students? Same for Oxford. Do you think it was a different experience to be a master's student versus an undergrad student?
I think pretty much it would be the same. I guess the only difference is that you have a specific thing that you're researching. You have a more in-depth interactions with your supervisor. You don't take classes. Maybe you'll get to teach one if you're doing a PhD. But I think being in London is pretty much the same for undergrad and postgrad. And I think that's why I wanted to do a postgrad somewhere else in the UK, because I had fun in London. There's always so much to do. Pub crawls, karaoke nights.
What's the sports culture like generally in London and across these universities? Is the sports culture strong?
It's
enough?
very big. There's a lot of sports societies. I ended up not being in fencing, the society, because I had a timetable clash, but one of my closest friends at UCL did lacrosse. There were trainings, but mostly it was for making friends. Like, sports society is the best way for making friends, I think, because you get so much of a close interaction so frequently. There's so many socials happening every single week because they have a huge Wednesday sports night that takes place in one club called Loop. It's somewhere in Central. I forget. It was like 15 minutes from the campus.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, actually, because it's such a stereotype, again, that the US is big on sports. We don't hear as many people talk about how huge London and London universities are on sports, because it just doesn't occur somehow.
I think a lot of people do sports in UCL. Like, my friend did lacrosse and she very much enjoyed it. A lot of her closest friends right now are from the society.
So, given your entire experience, is there any specific advice you would have for a student, say, trying to decide whether or not they're a good fit for doing their undergrad in the UK?
I would just say don't be deterred by the thought that UK might be too academically focused. You won't get much of a life there. I think when I did my research, like, I would look up Reddit threads about, what's like this school really like? Because that's where I get my real advices on Reddit. They would actually really be helpful. Like, UK is not only academically focused, you get that element, but you also have so much to do. So just know your environment. Like, don't be scared to apply for the UK because you will have everything. London gives you everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's just such an important point. Where you're going is a very important point. Geography of the place, the setting of the place. Is it an urban place? Is it a college town? I think these factors will truly influence it, and not just the fact that it's based out of the UK. Are you going into central London, or are you going into a small place like Oxford? Like, is the student body everything you're going to have around, or is there basically an entire city to cater to your general requirements as a person? I think that is the same across US and the UK, because the similar setup comes in even for the US, because in college towns it's a very specific mood, whereas if you're in NYU, where the entire city is practically your campus, you're just having a very different college experience than, say, when you're situated at a Dartmouth, which is more remotely located.
I would say that at the very least, know that if you're a city person or if you're not, like, there are more campus-based colleges. Like, I think St. Andrews is one. It would really entirely depend where you want to be for the UK, in which area and which kind of setting you thrive in.
That makes a lot of sense. College fit is just super, super important. Okay, and that was the spill. Thank you so much for all your insights, Sophie. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and this helps you understand whether you want to go to the UK as an undergrad student. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this video, and see you in the next one.